locksmith looked at me like I was a ghost. "Sir, I can't let you in. This isn't your house anymore." I stood on the porch of the house I built with my own hands, the porch swing I installed the week before I deployed, the mailbox with my last name still stenciled on the side. And a stranger in a work van was telling me I didn't live there. Behind him, through the window, I could see someone else's furniture, someone else's curtains, someone else's life, sitting inside the walls I paid for with 11 years of my own sweat and effort. 3 days earlier, I was standing in a dust storm 11 time zones away, counting down the hours until I could finally come home. I never imagined home wouldn't be there waiting for me. If you've ever trusted the people closest to you with everything you have, your money, your name, your future, and found out they spent it while your back was turned, you need to hear what I found out next, because the house was only the first thing they took, and by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why I let them believe for 6 more months that I still didn't know. Stay till the end. This isn't a story about anger. It's a story about what happens when you're patient enough to let people finish digging their own hole. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is what I was to the people who were supposed to love me. I was the insurance policy nobody wanted to admit they were counting on. I enlisted at 22. Nothing dramatic, no big send-off speech, no flag-draped ceremony in my head. I just wanted something steady, something that made sense. Growing up, my family was the kind that smiled in photographs and calculated in private. My older sister, Denise, always got there first. First car, first down payment, first everything, because our parents believed in helping the one who's struggling. And somehow, I was never the one struggling, even when I was. I didn't resent it. Not at first. I told myself I didn't need the help. I was building something on my own, slow, steady, with my own hands. By the time I was 31, I had a house. Paid mostly out of pocket, deployment bonuses stacked year after year, no big flashy purchase, just brick by brick. It was small, 3 bedrooms, a porch that faced east so I could watch the sun come up on the mornings I was home. It was the first thing in my life that was completely, unquestionably mine. I got married 2 years before my last deployment. Her name was Rachel. It didn't last. Not because of anything dramatic, just distance and time and 2 people who grew into different shapes. We divorced quietly, and in the settlement, the house stayed mine. I paid her out. I kept the deed. I made sure of it, because even then, some part of me knew. In my family, things you don't protect on paper have a way of disappearing. I want you to sit with that instinct for a second, because it's going to matter more than you think. My last deployment was supposed to be 9 months. It turned into 14. There's a kind of silence that happens overseas. Not literal silence. There's always noise, always something, but a silence in the part of your brain that used to worry about home. You learn to compartmentalize because you have to. I called when I could. I talked to my mother most weeks. She always sounded the same. Warm, a little distracted, always ending the call the same way. Just get home safe. That's all we want. I believed her. That's the part that still gets me, even now. I actually believed that was all they wanted. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, 12 time zones and a satellite delay away, was that 6 months into my deployment, my unit had been quietly moved onto a classified rotation. Longer hours. No contact for stretches of up to 3 weeks at a time. And in one of those silent stretches, a rumor started making its way through certain corners of my family that a group from our unit had been in an incident. Nothing official, nothing confirmed. Just a rumor, the kind that spreads fast in families that are already looking for a reason. My mother, I'd learn later, spent 4 days convinced I was gone for good before anyone bothered confirming otherwise. 4 days. And in those 4 days, something happened that I don't think my family ever expected me to find out about. Because in those 4 days, my sister Denise sat down with my mother at my mother's kitchen table, the same table I ate breakfast at as a kid. And they started talking about what to do with everything I'd left behind. Not my belongings, not my memory, my house, my savings, my truck sitting in storage. Everything I had built being divided up in real time, based on a rumor nobody had bothered to verify. When I finally got word out, a 2-line message through my CO, routed through channels confirming I was alive, just unreachable. It took 11 more days to actually reach my mother. 11 days where the conversation about what to do with everything didn't stop. It just quietly kept going, dressed up now as something more practical. He'll want us to handle things while he's gone anyway. It's smarter if the house isn't just sitting empty. We're not doing anything permanent, we're just managing it. I want you to remember that word, managing. Because 8 months later, when my deployment extended a second time and my calls home got even less frequent, managing turned into something else entirely. And I had no idea, not the slightest idea, until the day I stood on my own porch with a locksmith telling me I didn't live there anymore. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had a moment where you realized the people who were supposed to protect your interests were actually the ones you needed protecting from? Type. I know that feeling in the comments if you've lived through something like this. I read every one of them, and honestly, some of your stories have been harder to hear than my own. Now, back to the house. Here's what I found out piece by piece over the following weeks, not from my family who never volunteered a word of it, but from a title search I ran the same night the locksmith turned me away, sitting in a rental car in a parking lot, running on 4 hours of sleep and pure disbelief. 8 months into my second extension, my mother and sister had gone to a lawyer, not mine, a family friend who'd known Denise since high school, and initiated something called a quiet title claim. In plain terms, a legal process used, usually when a property owner is missing, presumed lost, or otherwise unreachable for an extended period, and someone else needs the court to formally recognize a change in ownership. They built their case around the deployment gap. The 4 days I was unreachable during the rumor. The 11 days after that. They stretched the story. I want to be precise about this because precision matters. They stretched a 2.5-week communication gap into what their filing described as over 5 months of no contact, with the family reasonably believing the service member to be deceased or permanently unreachable. That wasn't true. It was never true. I called my mother 9 times in those 5 months. 9. I have the phone records. But nobody at that hearing was checking my phone records because nobody at that hearing was me. I wasn't there to defend anything because I didn't know there was anything to defend. The house, my house, was transferred into my mother's name through that filing. 6 weeks later, it was sold. $412,000. My mother kept $60,000 of it for expenses and legal fees. The rest went to Denise, framed as helping her finally get on her feet. The same phrase I'd heard my entire childhood, except this time it wasn't about a car or a down payment. It was about the one thing in my life I'd built entirely on my own. My truck, sitting in a storage facility I'd prepaid for 2 years, had its storage contract quietly canceled 4 months in. When the facility couldn't reach me, because of course they couldn't, I was on a base with restricted comms. They auctioned it off per their contract terms. My mother had been listed as an emergency contact on that storage account. She was notified. She didn't call me. She didn't even mention it in our next phone call 3 days after the auction happened. I remember that call. She asked me if I was eating enough. My savings account, the one I'd built specifically because I never trusted joint accounts, the one that was entirely, solely in my name, was untouched. That's the one thing they couldn't reach. And looking back now, I think that's the only reason I ever found out any of this in time to do something about it. Because here's the thing about my family that I hadn't fully understood until that night in the parking lot. They weren't cruel people who woke up one day and decided to destroy me. I don't think that's how it happened. I think it happened slowly, one rationalized decision at a time, each one small enough to explain away. He'd want us to handle things. It's not permanent, we're just managing it. He has plenty of money in savings anyway. This evens things out. Each sentence a small brick in a wall they built between what they were doing and what it actually was. That's the part that scares me more than if they'd just been villains. Villains you can see coming. This was slower, quieter, and by the time I understood the full shape of it, it had already been going on for the better part of a year. I sat in that parking lot until almost 4 in the morning. And somewhere around 3, something shifted in me. Not rage. I want to be honest with you, because a lot of these stories online turn this moment into some explosive breakdown, and that's not what happened to me. What happened was quieter, and I think more dangerous for the people who'd done this. I got calm. Very, very calm, because I realized something. They didn't know that I knew. Quick gut check for you. If you found out something like this had happened behind your back, would you confront them immediately, or would you do what I did next? Drop a comment. Confront now, or wait and watch. I'm curious how many of you think the same way I do, because what I did next is going to surprise some of you. There's something about military training that civilians rarely understand, and it matters for the rest of this story. You learn to gather every fact before you move. Not because it's a clever tactic people imagine from movies, but because acting on half the picture gets people hurt. That habit doesn't switch off once the uniform comes off. So instead of calling my mother that night and demanding answers, which honestly was my first instinct, I chose a different path. I found a lawyer, not a family friend, not anyone connected to us. A stranger 3 states away who focused on exactly one area: property rights for military service members. Here's something my own family apparently never bothered to learn. The Service Members Civil Relief Act, the SCRA, exists precisely to protect people in my position. It limits certain legal actions, including property transfers and court rulings, against active duty service members who are unreachable because of deployment, unless very specific court procedures are followed first. My family's quiet title filing had skipped nearly every one of those procedures. Not by accident either. The lawyer who filed it for them handled general family matters, nothing specialized. He either didn't know the SCRA applied to my case, or he never checked. Either way, my new lawyer described the filing in 3 words: easy to challenge. But I didn't file anything right away. I asked her one question first. How long could I legally wait and still have an airtight case? 18 months, she said. As long as I filed within 18 months of returning from deployment, the SCRA protections would hold in full. So I waited. I finished the rest of my deployment as if nothing had changed. I called my mother every week, same as always. I asked about her garden. I asked about Denise's new apartment, the one paid for, I now knew, with roughly $180,000 of what used to be mine. I let her describe every detail, down to the countertops. I came home on schedule to a welcome gathering my mother put together at her house, the same house I grew up in, complete with a banner, a cake, and Denise standing in the kitchen wearing a bracelet I didn't recognize, something I'd later learn cost $11,000. I hugged everyone. I smiled for the photos. I ate a slice of that cake. For the 6 months that followed, I lived like a man with no idea what had happened to him. I rented a small apartment across town, telling everyone it was just temporary while I sort out my next steps. And every week, quietly, I gathered one more piece of proof. Bank statements. The storage facility's records from the day my truck was sold at auction. A certified copy of the title transfer paperwork. Messages from Denise describing, without a hint of guilt, how she was finally getting a real start in life, never once mentioning where that start had actually come from. I'll be honest with you, those 6 months were among the hardest of my life, harder in some ways than the deployment itself. Sitting across from my mother at dinner, watching her hand me the potatoes, knowing exactly what she'd done, and choosing on purpose to say nothing. People ask me now if I regret waiting that long. I don't. Every single day of that quiet, I was putting together something they couldn't undo. And more than that, I needed to know for myself whether there was any explanation I could actually live with. I gave them 6 full months to tell me the truth on their own. They never did. Not once. Not a single word. At one family dinner, Denise even made a passing comment about how some people just don't need as much help as others, looking straight at me as she said it. And my mother laughed along with her. That was the night I stopped waiting for an explanation. If you're just joining partway through, quick recap. I came home from deployment to find my house had been sold, my truck auctioned, and nearly $500,000 of my life quietly redistributed to my sister, based on a legal filing my family built on a lie about how long I'd actually been unreachable. I found out almost immediately. I told no one. For 6 months, I gathered every piece of proof I needed while my family had no idea I knew anything at all. Now, here's what I did with all of it. 11 months after I came home, my lawyer filed on my behalf. Not a lawsuit dressed up as revenge, a straightforward SCRA violation claim, backed by federal law, backed by my actual phone records showing consistent contact throughout the exact period my family's filing claimed I was unreachable, backed by the auction paperwork my mother had signed as emergency contact and never disclosed. The law, when it's actually enforced correctly, doesn't care about family loyalty. It doesn't care about he'll understand we were just managing things. Courts treat SCRA violations seriously because the entire point of the law is protecting people who are, quite literally, defending the country and cannot defend their own property at the same time. My mother was served on a Tuesday morning. I know because Denise called me that afternoon, her voice doing something I'd never heard it do before, genuinely, completely afraid. What is this? What did you do? I remember being almost surprised by how steady my own voice was. I didn't do anything, I told her. I just finally told the truth about what happened while I was gone. The case moved faster than either of them expected. The SCRA violation was clear-cut. My lawyer later told me it was one of the most straightforward cases she'd worked in years because my family, in their confidence that I'd never find out, had left almost no gaps in the paper trail proving what they'd done. The court ordered the return of the full value of the house sale, with interest calculated from the date of the sale. It ordered restitution for the truck. It referred the original filing lawyer for a bar complaint for failing to verify service member status before filing, something that's a required check, one he apparently skipped. My mother had to sell her own home to cover the judgment. Denise, who'd already spent a significant portion of the money on the apartment, the bracelet, a car, had to take out a loan against her new property just to make partial restitution, with the rest structured as a payment plan that will follow her for years. I didn't ask for any of that specifically. I asked for what was legally mine. The law decided the rest. I know some of you are going to say I should feel bad about this. That family is family. That money isn't worth breaking a relationship over. I understand that perspective. Genuinely, I do. But I want you to consider something before you decide how you feel about what happened next. This wasn't about money for me anymore, somewhere around month 3 of that silence. It was about whether the people who were supposed to protect me even saw me as a person, or just as a resource to be managed while I was inconvenient to consider. Keep that in mind for what's coming. My mother asked to see me once the judgment came through. Just the two of us at a coffee shop neutral ground, her choice. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically. Something else. Like the version of her I'd grown up believing in had quietly stepped aside, and this was just a woman. Tired. Caught. I need you to understand, she said. We thought you were gone. For those first few days, we really thought? For 4 days, I said. Then I called. 9 times over the next 5 months. You picked up 7 of them. She didn't have an answer for that. I watched her search for one and come up empty, and something in me, I won't pretend it wasn't there, felt a kind of quiet satisfaction in that silence. Not cruelty. Just the simple fact of finally being believed by the only person in the room who mattered. Myself. I'm not here for an apology, I told her, which was mostly true. I'm here because I want you to understand something. I gave you 6 months to tell me the truth. Every dinner, every phone call, every chance to just say, we made a mistake. We're going to fix it. You had 6 months, and in all that time, the only thing you and Denise ever said about it was a joke about how I don't need as much help as other people. She started to cry. I want to be honest. Some part of me expected that to feel like a victory. It didn't. It felt like grief. Grief for a mother I'd apparently never really had. Only the idea of one built up over 30-some years of wanting to believe in someone. Your father would be so disappointed, she said, which, of everything she could have said in that moment, that was the one that actually made me angry, because I lost my father when I was 19, long before any of this happened, and invoking him felt like the last card of someone with nothing left to play. My father, I told her, spent his whole life teaching me to build things that couldn't be taken from me. I think if he were here, he'd be disappointed in exactly one person at this table. And it isn't me. I paid for her coffee. I stood up, and I left. It's been almost 2 years since that conversation. I don't speak to Denise at all. She's never reached out, not once, not even a message. I think some part of her still believes she was owed something, that this was somehow unfair to her specifically. And I've made peace with the fact that I may never change her mind about that. My mother and I speak occasionally. Holidays mostly, short conversations, careful ones. I won't pretend it's healed. I don't think it ever fully will be, and honestly, I've stopped expecting it to. What I have instead is something I didn't have before all of this happened. Clarity. I know now with complete certainty exactly what my family will and won't do when they think no one's watching. That knowledge cost me almost everything I'd built. But it also, in a strange way, set me free from spending the rest of my life wondering. I bought a new house 18 months ago with the restitution money. Smaller than the first one. Different city, actually. Somewhere none of them have ever been. I put the deed in a trust this time, structured specifically so that nothing like what happened before could ever happen again, no matter how long I'm gone, no matter who claims to be just managing things while I'm away. The porch faces east again. I made sure of that, at least. Some habits, apparently, you don't lose. People sometimes ask me if I'd have done anything differently, if I regret waiting those 6 months instead of confronting them the moment I found out. I always tell them the same thing. Those 6 months weren't about revenge. They were about making absolutely certain, before I did anything, that I had the full truth, and that whatever I did next was something I could stand behind for the rest of my life. I can. That's worth more to me than the house ever was. If there's one thing I want you to take from this, it's that patience isn't weakness. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay quiet long enough to see exactly who someone really is before you decide what they deserve. There's one more piece of this story I haven't told you yet. Something Denise did 3 months after the judgment, when she thought I'd finally moved on and stopped watching. It involves a second attempt, one that almost worked, and the one text message that stopped it cold. That's part 2. It's coming soon. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And if this story meant something to you, let me know in the comments. I read every single one.